Story 1: The Dyatlov Pass Tragedy, Frozen Terror in the Ural Mountains. The wind howled like a wounded animal, tearing through the frozen silence of the Ural Mountains. It was January 1959, and a group of 9 experienced hikers, students and engineers led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, had set out to conquer Otorten Peak, a brutal climb in the Siberian wilderness. They were skilled, fit, and prepared for the -30°C cold. But none of them could have prepared for what happened next. Days into their trek, the group set up camp on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name in the local Mansi language meant Dead Mountain. They pitched their tent in heavy snow, anchoring it with skis and backpacks. That night, something went terribly wrong. Sometime around midnight, the hikers ripped open their tent from the inside, fleeing into the darkness without boots, coats, or proper clothing. Some were barefoot, others wore only socks. They ran downhill, toward the tree line, as if escaping an unseen terror. Search teams found the abandoned tent weeks later, its entrance flapping like a ghostly flag in the wind. Inside, personal belongings lay untouched: cameras, journals, even a guitar. But the hikers were gone. Footprints in the snow told a fractured story: 8 sets of tracks, some dragging bare feet, leading into the woods. The 9th set belonged to Yuri Krivonishenko, who had no shoes at all. The first 2 bodies were discovered under a pine tree near a makeshift fire. Yuri Doroshenko and Krivonishenko wore only underwear, their hands blackened from trying to burn branches. Nearby, team leader Igor Dyatlov lay dead in his long johns, clutching a camera with no film left. 3 more hikers, Zina Kalmogorova, Rustam Slobodin, and Ludmila Dubinina, were found frozen in the snow, facing the camp as if trying to return. Slobodin's skull was cracked, but doctors ruled it not fatal. The remaining 4 hikers took longer to find. 2 months later, searchers uncovered a grim scene under 4 meters of snow. Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignol's skull was smashed with a force likened to a car crash. Alexander Kolevatov lay nearby, his face buried in ice. The last 2, Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov, were the most horrifying. Dubinina's tongue, eyes, and part of her lips were missing, likely eaten by scavengers. But Zolotaryov's ribs were shattered inward, as if crushed by a giant hand. Both corpses had strange orange skin and traces of radiation on their clothes. Theories exploded like wildfire. Soviet officials hastily closed the case, blaming a compelling natural force. But the hikers' families refused to accept it. Over decades, investigators and conspiracy theorists pieced together clues. Some claimed an avalanche forced the group to flee, but no avalanche zone existed there. Others pointed to infrasound, a low-frequency noise caused by wind. That could induce panic. Yet nothing explained the violence done to their bodies. Stranger details emerged. A hiker's journal mentioned orange spheres in the sky days before the incident. A separate group of skiers 50 kilometers away reported seeing glowing orbs that night. Soviet documents later revealed the military had been testing parachute mines in the area, possibly explaining the radiation. But why were the hikers' journals and camera film confiscated by the KGB? Why did some victims' clothing show radioactivity? The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Were the hikers driven mad by infrasound, attacked by Yetis, or caught in a secret military experiment? The truth lies buried in the snow, with the 9 souls who fled into the night, forever running from a horror they could not outrun. To this day, no one knows what forced those skilled hikers to slash their tent and run barefoot into a blizzard. But locals still warn travelers to avoid Kholat Syakhl after dark. They say the mountain is cursed. That on quiet nights, you can hear faint screams in the wind, and see shadows moving where no shadows should be. Story 2: The Ghosts of Mount Low, the Yuba County Five's final journey. The snow fell thick and heavy on the night of February 24, 1978, burying the winding roads of the Sierra Nevada mountains under a silent white blanket. 5 friends from Yuba County, California, Ted Weiher, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias, had driven into the mountains to watch a college basketball game. They were ordinary men in their 20s and 30s, some with mild intellectual disabilities, others just quiet souls who stuck together. None of them knew it would be their last night alive. The group left the game early, around 9 p.m., but they never made it home. Instead, their blue 1969 Mercury Montego took a wrong turn onto a remote Forest Service road. The car climbed higher into the mountains, its tires slipping on ice, until it stalled near a locked gate on a lonely stretch of road. There were no houses, no phones, and no signs for miles. The temperature dropped to -4 degrees Celsius, and the men faced a choice: stay in the car and freeze, or try to walk to safety. They chose to walk. 4 days later, a motorist found their abandoned car. The keys were still in the ignition, and the gas tank was half full. A map lay open on the seat, but the men were gone. Search teams combed the area, but heavy snow buried any footprints. Days turned to weeks. Then, in June, 4 months later, a Forest Service worker stumbled upon a scene straight out of a nightmare. Deep in the woods, a small emergency cabin stood unlocked. Inside, the body of Ted Weiher lay on a bunk bed, wrapped in 8 blankets. He had grown a full beard, and his feet were black with frostbite. Doctors said he had survived for weeks after disappearing. The cabin's pantry was stocked with canned food, but the cans were unopened. A propane heater sat unused. Outside, the frozen bodies of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found half a mile apart. Jack Hewitt's remains were discovered miles away, slumped against a tree. Gary Mathias, the only one without a disability, was never found. The mystery only deepened. Why did the men ignore the food and heat that could have saved them? Why did Ted Weiher, who could have survived, starve to death surrounded by supplies? A diary found in the cabin had one chilling entry: "They won't let us leave." Who were they? Search teams found no signs of other people, no footprints, no tire tracks. But the cabin's door had been locked from the outside. Theories swirled. Some said the men panicked, their minds broken by hypothermia. Others whispered of foul play. Gary Mathias had a history of mental illness. Had he led the group into a trap? Or did they encounter something darker? Locals told stories of Mount Lowe being haunted by the ghosts of loggers who died in the 1800s. A few search volunteers swore they heard voices in the woods, calling for help long after the men were dead. To this day, no one knows why 5 men chose to wander into a frozen wilderness instead of staying in their car. Why they left warmth and food untouched. Why Ted Weiher's body showed signs of being cared for, blankets tucked around him, but also of neglect, his feet rotting away. The case was closed as accidental death, but the families never accepted it. The cabin was torn down, the forest reclaimed the road, and the truth vanished with the snow. Years later, hikers still report strange things near Mount Lowe, footprints that appear overnight, voices echoing through empty valleys, and the faint smell of propane in the air. Some say the Yuba County 5 are still out there, trapped in the cold, forever running from the shadows that followed them into the dark. Story 3: The Watchers, Dale Stelling's disappearance in Mesa Verde. The sun burned high in the sky over Mesa Verde National Park on June 9, 2013, a dry, hot day that promised adventure for 51-year-old Dale Stelling. He had come to Colorado with his wife, parents, and brother to explore the ancient cliff dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans, a place where history clung to the red rocks like whispers. But Dale never returned from his solo hike on the Petroglyph Point Trail, a rugged path winding through canyons and past stone carvings older than time. Dale was a gentle man, a loving husband, and an experienced hiker. His family last saw him around 1 p.m. as he set off alone, carrying only a water bottle and a small digital camera. The trail was challenging but well marked, a 2.4-mile loop through rocky terrain. When he didn't return by evening, his wife, Nancy, reported him missing. Rangers launched a search that night, but the darkness swallowed their flashlights. By dawn, helicopters circled overhead, and teams with dogs scoured the cliffs. Nothing. The days dragged on. Temperatures soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the park's maze of canyons became an oven. Search teams found no footprints, no torn clothing, no sign of a fall. It was as if the desert had opened its mouth and swallowed Dale whole. Then, on the fourth day, a volunteer spotted something glinting in the sun, a camera, half buried in the dust near a steep drop-off. It was Dale's. The camera's last photos stopped hearts. Early shots showed Dale smiling at the trailhead, the blue sky framing his sun hat. Later images captured the petroglyphs, spirals, handprints, and strange symbols carved into the stone. But the final photos were different. Blurry, tilted, as if taken in panic. One showed a shadowy figure standing on a cliff ledge, too tall and thin to be human. Another revealed a cluster of dark shapes peering down from the rocks above. Rangers dismissed them as tricks of light, but Nancy insisted Dale didn't imagine things. He saw something. The search expanded. Divers checked reservoirs. Cave teams rappelled into hidden crevices. Native American trackers joined, their faces grim. One elder muttered about the old ones guarding the ruins. By week's end, over 200 people had combed the park. Yet no trace of Dale emerged, not a bone, not a shoe. Even stranger, searchers noticed an unnatural silence. No birds sang. No snake slithered. The usual buzz of life in the desert was gone, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Rangers closed the case after a month, calling it a misadventure. But the Stelling family refused to quit. They hired private investigators, who uncovered odd details. A park employee confessed he'd seen a man matching Dale's description near an off-limits archaeological site that day. Another hiker reported hearing a scream echo through the canyon hours after Dale vanished. Most chillingly, a photo analyst found a figure in the background of Dale's last image, a face-like shadow in the rocks, watching. Years later, the mystery festers. Why did Dale, a cautious hiker, wander off the trail? Why did his camera show those eerie figures? Locals tell stories of the Stone Watchers, spirits of the ancestral Puebloans who punish those who disrespect their sacred sites. Some claim Dale stumbled into a place between worlds, a door sealed for centuries. Others blame gangs or kidnappers, though no ransom was ever demanded. Nancy visits Mesa Verde every June, leaving water bottles along the trail, just in case. Rangers say nothing grows where Dale's camera was found. No weeds, no bugs. At dusk, when the cliffs glow red, hikers sometimes hear footsteps crunching behind them. They turn, but no one is there. And in the fading light, the petroglyphs seem to shift, their ancient eyes following every move. Dale Stelling is still out there, somewhere in the vast, sun-scorched silence of Mesa Verde. Waiting. Watching. Or being watched.